Executive Director at Youth Service Bureau. And I've been with YSB now for a little over 31 years. And I'm very excited to join you tonight and have this opportunity to share some information on developing resiliency in our children and teenagers and kids. And then we'll kind of dial that in a little bit to distance learning and what can that mean and how does that overlap. I want to mention tonight that our class is being recorded so that others can view it later. So please don't let that discourage you from asking any questions or making comments. I just want you to know that it is being recorded. And I know that this is a Zoom type class, and I would much prefer if we could be together in a room and interact in person. But we're going to do this using the new technology. And I am open to questions and comments as we go. So try to get my attention in some way if you'd like. I'm happy to pause and respond. And if I don't get questions along the way, there will be some time at the end that we can interact and do some questions that way. And I'm wondering if you don't mind, if we might be able to go quickly around the room and do a quick little introduction. What I'm interested in hearing is perhaps your name and the ages of your children and something that you'd like to get out of tonight's presentation. And I'm not sure the best way to do this. Maybe I'll mention what I can see on my screen. And if you're interested in responding, you could unmute your microphone and respond to the questions. And if you don't want to, you can pass. The first person as I go through my view is someone, the screen name is Ms. Teresa.
And I missed the question because I was helping a kiddo with bath time.
Okay, we're just doing real quick introductions. If you might be comfortable sharing your name, the ages of your kids, and something you'd like to learn in tonight's presentation.
So I'm Teresa Helms, and I am one of the secretaries for the PTA. And I have 3 kiddos. I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm just kind of looking to see kind of what the overall, you know, it's all resiliency. So like technology always piques my interest. So is there anything that talks about technology, and will the kids be kind of bouncing back from getting too much? Is it a good thing, a bad thing? Is there anything to say about any of that? It's kind of an interest of mine.
Okay, very good, thank you. The next person on my screen is someone named Megan.
Hi, my name is Megan Buchanan. I live here in Stillwater, and I have a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old, 2 boys, both currently at the high school. I actually just sat down at my computer, was not planning on being on this, but it popped up on my Facebook feed, and I was like, hey, you know, I could really check it out. So, you know, I don't really know what I'm looking for, other than I just know that this is such a challenge for us, the distance learning and the pandemic. So I'm just eager to get whatever I can to help, you know, as much as I can with my kids.
Great, thank you. The next person is someone whose screen name is iPhone E. Okay.
Hi.
Oh.
Yes, I think that's me.
Hello.
Hello. I am a member of the Lake Elmo elementary community, and I have a 4th grader and a 1st grader. And my 1st grader is struggling more than my 4th grader is. My 1st grader just doesn't have a lot of motivation to be on Zoom calls, and we're doing okay. It's just challenging to get him to do his work. And then February is always a really hard time for me personally because it's the middle of the winter. And all this is just kind of coalescing with issues that I deal with every year, like seasonal affective disorder and things like that. So it's okay. It's just very monotonous, I guess, is my biggest complaint, which I guess is better than exciting right now. So
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Did Megan have an opportunity? Oh, Megan.
I
okay.
did. Yep, I did.
How about Lara Zuliger?
Hey, good job. You got it right. I'm Lara Zuliger. I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. And it seems that one of them is much more resilient than the other. So I know that's probably a personality thing, but maybe any tips or tricks for building resilience when it's not quite so natural in one of them?
Okay, thank you. Good. How about Melanie McNulty?
Hi there. I'm going to leave my camera off because I've been Zooming all day with kids. I'm a
That's okay.
teacher in the district. I'm a stakeholder in a variety of ways. I have family members. I am involved with trying to help out as much as possible in all sorts of ways. And I'm really just here to learn because I can see that this is taking a toll on some kids. So I'm here to listen and learn.
Okay. Stephen Gordy?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Stephen Gordy, the principal at Lake Elmo Elementary School. It's a privilege for me to be here, and I'm grateful for our PTA for hosting this. Mary and Mike, thanks for joining us. I am a parent of 3 children, 18 and older, and so I'm very interested also in kind of just hearing this from a parent perspective and an educator's perspective on how best we can support our kiddos.
Good, thank you. How about the Stillwater family? How about Sarah?
See, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I guess I'm the 4th one in my neighborhood here right now. So I'm here because Eva recommended it, and she's my neighbor. I'm waving out my window to you right now. I'm just here to hear whatever you have to say. So thanks for having us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I got a chance to ask everybody who shows up on my screen. So I'm just going to get started if that's okay. And then try to get my attention. I'm going to actually shrink down this gallery view so that I can see some of my material. And thanks for sharing what you guys have shared so far. And Mary, if you could help keep an eye on the room for me if someone's trying to get my attention, because I'm kind of shrinking screens a little bit.
With pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I typically do when I talk about resilience is to begin by asking parents, what definition have you heard of, or what definition do you have for resilience? But to save time tonight, and we're not actually really together, we're doing this kind of virtually, I'm going to share a definition that I've came across and I really like it. There are different ways of defining resilience, but this one actually came out of the Navy SEALs. And I was reading this article on developing resilience that came from the Navy SEALs, and I was delightedly surprised. And that's what I'm using a little bit as an outline for tonight's presentation. It's really geared for parents. And then we're going to kind of tie that in perhaps for teachers, and we're going to weave in distance learning at the end. But the definition is also available, and there's an outline in the chat space. So if you know how to work Zoom and can click and open up the chat section, there should be a link. And if you click on that, it will open up kind of an outline of what I'm covering. If you have a printer, you could print that out and use it to take notes, or you can just use a piece of paper, or if you're not really a note taker, you can just listen. That's okay too. Here's the definition of resilience that I came across and I really like. It can be defined as the capacity to learn and recover quickly from difficulties and challenges, also known as toughness. The capacity to learn and recover quickly from difficulties and challenges. And so there's a variety of things that parents can do to help raise resilient kids or instill that quality in their children. And of course, the earlier we start, the better, but we can start at any time and still try to develop that capacity for resilience. The research says that some people are kind of born with this. And I think that's true, but I also know it can be developed and enhanced, and parents have a wonderful opportunity to raise their children to be more resilient. So let's go through that outline a little bit. The first item says, set a great example. And that's really important. And you guys know this as parents. Your kids are watching you, and they will do what you do. And if you pick yourself up time and time again after getting kind of knocked down, they will adopt that intuitively. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a famous writer, has a quote that I kind of like. And Emerson says, "Who you are will speak more loudly to your children than anything you say." And that's that idea of what we do and how we're acting is what the kids will imitate. The next item on the list is take responsibility. And it's important that we teach our children from early on not to pass the blame or to make excuses. And we live in a culture that really does promote that blame game. And as parents, it's my view that we have got to be the antidote to what the kids are seeing and hearing on a daily basis in our culture about blaming others, that the capacity to take responsibility for ourselves really is part of becoming more and more resilient. There's another element here, seek to serve others. And children who know that they have something to offer others are learning that they can shape the world around them for the better. And that's really, really important. So the practical way to bring that to life is give your kids opportunities to serve others with you. One of the best ways to do that, I think, is through volunteering somewhere close to home in your community and doing that side by side with your children and explaining how and why that volunteering is helpful to other people. And that shapes kind of an optimism in our kids that they have some capacity to actually make a difference. And they learn that through serving others. The next item is practice daily gratitude. And sometimes I smile and I kind of laugh and think, wow, this kind of outline was sort of created by a Navy SEAL, and it's not what I expected. But I want to share what this person had in mind. And when it comes to practicing daily gratitude, he was writing that framing your mind to appreciate things, even under stress, improves your performance and helps you adjust your perspective. So think about that. Our children learn this from us. If we can show appreciation or look for the positive in things, even during times of stress, the kids imitate us. And that's very important to remember. It's very challenging to do. The next item is to let others solve their own problems. Okay, and as that kind of sinks in, this is where it becomes real challenging for us as parents. I myself have 5 kids. Just like Mr. Gordy, they're older, they're all college age or beyond college. But thinking back when they were younger, this is a challenge to let our kids solve their own problems. It's very important in creating that capacity to be resilient. It does not mean letting our kids flounder or drown. It does mean that there is often as much to be gained from learning how to solve problems as there is in solving the problem itself. That learning how to solve a problem, or having that confidence that I can solve a problem, is part of resilience. Let your kids know that you are there for them and that they can call on you when needed, and give them the opportunity to solve their own problems. So, well, the next one that we'll cover kind of goes a little more detail on this, but I came across another article when I was preparing for this presentation, and one of the ways to do this is to ask your children how questions instead of why questions. And as parents, we're often quick to say why. Like, why did you do that? What were you thinking? But asking a how question helps create a growth mindset. You may have heard about that in the research. It helps kids look at what comes next after they've made a decision or taken a certain action. Okay, the next item on that list is a good reminder to all of us parents to be a mentor, not a savior. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is for our child to live with the consequences of their decisions, including mistakes, even the big ones. Rescuing our children can get in the way of them actually learning. Often the mistakes that kids might make don't have the long-range impacts on their lives the way we think they might as parents when it happens when they're young. And the comparison point is, if they make the same mistake when they get older, like as a young adult, then the consequences or repercussions can be much more dangerous. So it's good for kids to be able to learn from a mistake. And I'm going to share something with you. Don't run around and tell a whole bunch of kids about this, but I share this parent to parent. Personally, it is my secret wish that every teenager gets a job and then gets fired from that job. There is no better learning than that, particularly if you as parents are supporting your child to look at their own behavior. It doesn't ruin their future. It doesn't reflect on you as a parent. It can be a great learning opportunity. And what better time for a person to learn that type of lesson as a teenager, as opposed to somewhere in their adulthood. The next item says, embrace failure. Okay, I know that sounds kind of like a cliche, but it's true. Nobody will accomplish anything of substance or greatness if he or she is so afraid to fail that they choose not to act. And here's the rub. Our culture really focuses on perfection. In fact, I think our culture worships perfection, if I can use that term. Think of the Olympics. You know, if you don't get the gold medal, it's like you're nothing. And you only got the silver. And sometimes a bronze medal winner, they're like third best in the entire world, is just sort of overlooked because of how our culture approaches perfection. That over focus on perfection is actually dangerous to our mental health, and it's dangerous to the developmental growth in our children. So how do we embrace failure? Well, it takes an effort because our culture doesn't push for that. Through failure, our kids learn how to struggle with adversity, and they learn how to confront their own fear. And by reflecting on failure, our kids can begin to see how they can correct themselves and try again for better results. Avoiding failure creates fear of failure. And parents, protecting children from failure has the opposite effect than what we really want. Kids need to have some failure and to learn and grow from it. That's part of this capacity we call resilience. So the next item is to encourage risk-taking. Risk-taking and failure go hand in hand. Risk-taking is necessary to be resilient. And I urge all of us as parents to remember, be careful of our tendencies to want to overprotect our children. A sense of real capacity and real competency is developed in our kids when they see that they can indeed rise to a challenge, and we should be encouraging that growth, not making things too easy for the kids. Paving the way for children does not help create resiliency. And of course, as parents, we assert our authority when it's sensible. Not every risk that children might want to take is a good risk to take. Sometimes we need that experienced, more authoritative person, like a parent, a grown-up, to show us the better way. The recommendation here, the balancing point, is just don't jump in constantly, making every single course correction for your kids. The way I would recommend it, we're there to guide and influence our children, not exercise control over them or of them. I want to repeat that again. Our job as parents is to guide and influence our kids, absolutely, but not to think that we are there to exercise control over them. If we do that, we take away all of their capacity to become resilient people. They simply become obedient. And that's different than being resilient. Here's an interesting one. Express your love for the people you care about. Now, some people might wonder, holy cow, what does that have to do with resilience? Well, see if I can explain that. Relationships are important, and they're powerful, and they're valuable. And resilient people know that they can rely on the love and care of others in their community. So model for your kids how you can express your feelings of love and appreciation for others. It kind of comes back to that serving others recommendation. It's part of building in that sense that we're not alone. Someone's out there, and if we reach out for some help, there will be help and support. That is part of resilience. It's not this idea of total independent capacity. It includes making good utilization of those relationships. Okay, I wanted to mention one other thing before we shift into the distance learning and have some interaction and have some questions. And that is the importance of the difference between praise and encouragement. And this comes from the work that's done, the research that's being done on how do we raise self-esteem in children. And if we were together in the room and interacting a little more, I have a different way of doing this, but I'll just put this information out there for you. And I'm going to draw sort of a distinction. And we're going to talk about praise and encouragement. And I'm going to suggest that both are needed to improve self-esteem and confidence in children. But one or the other alone actually works against building this self-esteem or this resilience and capacity. So for your note-taking and for your consideration, I'll suggest that praise is something that's given after the fact from the authority person, and it focuses on the end result. Encouragement is something that is given along the way. It focuses on effort and interests and recognition of struggle. And I'm going to recommend that both of those items in tandem are needed, and parents need to be praising and encouraging to help create this thing called resilience in their children. So we have some time, and what I'd like to do next is see if we have a way to open up the conversation, and I'd like to specifically hear and respond, or even have you guys talk with each other a little bit about distance learning and how does resilience overlap with that, and how do we create some resilience. And let me add one more concept as we head into this part of the evening. We hear about the importance of routine, and you guys probably know this, you probably read about this. Why is routine so important for children? And that is because there's a predictability and a safety that comes with routine. And with the year 2020 and headed here into 2021, we've lost so many aspects of routine in all of our culture, including the distance learning. Things have become unpredictable, uncertain, changing, and that erodes our feeling of safety and security that comes with a typical routine. So with that in mind, and knowing that we're supposed to try to create routine to help our children, let's shift a little bit tonight and talk about how do we do resilience building at a time that's extremely challenging when it comes to this constantly changing hybrid or distance or in-person learning. And if anyone has a question, please unmute your microphone and I'll try to respond to that.
This is less of a question. Oh, sorry, is someone gonna go? This is Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Hi. So less of a question and more of a comment / question thought, you know, as we think about what you just said regarding, you know, the creating a schedule structure, that kind of stuff, routine, when all, you know, when all the learning is changing. The added part to that too is it's the type of learn. It's not just distance, hybrid, or in person. It's when you're in person, what is happening. You know, everything is so different to create that sense of routine. And we found, you know, when my kids did hybrid, it was wonderful to be back in school, but it was still so different, right? It wasn't like just going from, you know, I'm at home and now I'm going to school and everything's the same. So that's the added challenge of that too, is it's still not routine, even when you're doing the thing that feels like it should be routine.
Yes. So Megan, can I ask, when that's happening for you, what's something you can try to do as a parent to build that sense of security or safety in your kids, knowing that the routines are kind of topsy-turvy?
I think the one thing that I liked about when we switched to distance, and if we went to hybrid again, I would probably do this if the process was the same, was on those days where they didn't have in-person learning, making sure that they were getting up to log in, when it was time for that class versus just get up, or like just create the routine at home that matches what was happening at school. Now, distance learning, when we moved to full distance, that allowed for that because you had to check in and you had to do synchronous learning. But before that, it was a little bit more flexible. And so I think if we went to that again, I would make sure that my kids were, getting up at the same time and logging into those classes.
Yep, that's a great idea. In fact, I'll borrow from the athletic world a little bit. The really good coaches of high performing athletes actually teach their athletes to stick to a routine like a bedtime and a wake up routine 7 days a week. And the purpose of that is our bodies really do acclimate to a routine. And that might be the only predictable force in our world. And that can be hard to follow at times, but I like your idea, and I kind of promote that a little bit. Having kids stick to a routine as the whole family as best you can with a wake up time and a bedtime is a good idea during the various quarantining that we do. Any other comments or ideas on or questions on the distance learning and the academics and how to build that resilience in our children?
I think for us in our house, what we did that seemed to help or kind of pull it together when there wasn't that structured routine of like the school day and everything else is making sure that, kind of like you said, the bedtime and the wake up time, but then having dinner and sitting down as a family every day, or we have our own bedtime routine where we'll read stories for like 20 minutes before bed, and just kind of sticking to those other routines that we can build, that if the school day wasn't consistent, at least there's those other normal factors.
Awesome. Yep. The more you can rely on those and the kids know that those are still going to happen, even when other things are changing, that can be very helpful and add to their capacity. How about one more thing, like at school for the younger kids, they have like recess. And during this time of, the different levels of quarantine, and maybe this gets controversial, but it's so important for kids to be able to get some exercise or get outside and have some fresh air. Even building that into your routine is really important, and it's something that the kids can look forward to and count on. And you have to do it, safely and smartly, but that getting some exercise and fresh air is so important. And I know I've spoken with some families where that was curtailed during the quarantine, because we're not sure of like, well, what's safe, what's okay, what can we do? Or being creative and figuring out how to accomplish that is really important for the growth and development of kids too.
I find it was helpful. I have a second grader and a third grader, to give them a little bit of space to make their own decision too. We'll have a schedule, but it doesn't have necessarily a time set to them. You just have to make sure you get A, B, C, and D done, and kind of let them decide, do I want to do B first? Do I want to do C first? Do I want to take a break between them? And I would I try not to hover as much, but I would just kind of let them do their thing and steer them back if they get distracted. But give them a little bit of that feeling of, I get to decide, even though together you're coming up with a schedule that you're happy with and that they feel like they have some control.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Renee, another suggestion or reminder to parents around bedtime routines. Oftentimes we think of, and this is truer with younger children, right? When they get a little older, it changes. But when we think of bedtime routines, we're often thinking of like the clock. We look at our watch and we think, okay, we're going to do this for this amount of time. And then at this clock time, we move to the next step. And what I want to remind all of you parents, a secret little trick here is that routine is not based necessarily on time. It's based on sequence of activity. So let's say, well, in the olden days, we'd say if we were visiting at Grandma and Grandpa's house and we got home late, sometimes as parents, we think, well, there goes our routine. Let's just throw them in bed. Just let's put the house to bed now. But the kids are counting on that routine. Well, it isn't always about time, but that sequence is what's familiar for kids. And if you can capture the sequence, you create that same sense of predictability and security that you're looking for. A way I can describe it, like up at the high school, maybe even in the middle schools, once in a while, they'll have these days where they shorten all of the hours. It's like a shorter day, but the sequence is still there. And the kids adapt to it so quickly, so readily. And that it's predictable for the students when that happens. So give yourself kind of a break sometimes. It isn't about the time or how long you do a certain thing. Sometimes it's just that sequence. The order that you do it provides familiarity.
I have a question. I'm the teacher in the group, and when parents have had I can see a couple of my students since Christmas. It's kind of like the gal talked about how it can be, if you're kind of prone to that sad time of year, the February decline in sunlight, it can be a hard time for children too, for some children. And I have a couple of students where I can see that perhaps that's happening. And one mom got on the call with us and during a reading conference time, and she said, can this child, he's tired of doing the Zooms. And it was a difficult conversation, number one, because the child was right there as well. But I'm wondering, my response, there's that delicate balance of being permissive or retaining some expectations. And it's really tricky right now because there is a lot of anxiety, and anxiety is a tricky thing. I think we don't know enough about it. As a teacher, I don't. And I'm hoping I did the right thing by just expecting him to keep going, because I agree with you, the routine is everything. It's everything. And when the kids know it, they're really looking, I believe, for a higher expectation or an expectation. So thoughts on that? Because Zoom is tricky. I get tired of it too.
Yeah, in general, and there's always situations where something could be different, but in general, keeping those expectations, those high standards of kids is important. Our parental tendency is to want to dial back or protect the kids a little bit. But in terms of that academic rigor, it's okay for kids to be a little bit uncomfortable. Remember, our culture it's become sort of focused on comfort. And I think the pendulum may have swung a little bit too far, because life isn't always comfortable. And so helping kids push through some discomfort, and I don't mean agony or putting them in, bad situations, but helping a child get ready to face something that's uncomfortable and then come through it and celebrate with them. That's how we build resiliency in kids. And it doesn't just happen automatically. A lot of that comes at home, and parents have that influence, or siblings can be very instrumental. as well. So look for opportunities to recognize when kids have shown that capacity to adapt and push through discomfort. I think that's more important than trying to create an atmosphere of comfort all the time. That's just not realistic.
That's very helpful, and it's good language that I could use in another next step. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Thanks for asking. Any other questions or comments? I'm kind of looking down at the screen here to see if anybody's jumping in or wants to ask a question. Okay, well, if we're coming up kind of on the last opportunity, if you'd like to, let me ask you guys, was the material that I was presenting tonight, does this give you something to consider and think about, even if it's a little bit challenging as a parent? Did you find this to be thought-provoking and something you might be able to use at home?
I'll start again. I really appreciated one of the resilience steps, or whatever you call them, on asking how instead of why or what. As a parent of teenagers, there's a lot of like, why did that happen? Why are you only getting that? Why did you miss it? Why didn't you turn it in? But I love the idea of being like, tell me how you came to that decision not to do that, or, how did that, how did that happen? Because that's just a different way to say, why did you do that? But, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that decision? Because it gives them the opportunity to then say, well, this is what my thought process was versus why, because I was tired, because it's distance learning, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. That's why. But like a how is really I really like that. That's a really good takeaway for me.
Good.
So,
Good. You're welcome. That's a good tool for us as parents. And if just by asking how, it really focuses it empowering the child, right? It's letting them use their brain and give their rationale, and we don't have to immediately put it down, but just let them even hear themselves talk about their thinking. They learn from that. Yeah.
I appreciate too the reminder to not think so much about yourself. Being isolated and in this pandemic, when you're away from others, you forget about thinking of others, serving others, being grateful for others and other people and other things around you. And it's easy for us as adults, but our kids too, to just kind of retreat within themselves and get scared and nervous and sad. And if you're focusing on other people and serving and helping others, then you forget, or the hope is that you would forget about your own fears and focus on helping others. So thanks for that reminder.
Yeah. If I can just give a little example, I'll mention one of my kids, my daughter, was last spring when COVID had just hit. It was her senior year in college. And so she was bounced out of college. The school just said everyone had to get out of the dorms. And she ended up coming home to live with us, and that was perfectly fine. One of her things to do along those lines, she started cutting out paper hearts and bringing them around to neighbors and just saying, you can tape these up on your window just so we can all see that like there's hope out there. Well, she came up with that. I mean, that was pretty cool. And it was that sense of do something for others, something helpful. And it gave her that feeling of capability at a time when everything felt pretty crazy. So look for those simple little ways. It doesn't have to be extravagant, time-consuming ways, but your kids really will feel better when they know that they have some capacity to do some good. Yeah, even little things can make a big difference. We have just a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions or feedback, or I think the principal, I think, is still here. If anyone had a question specific to the school building, maybe he could respond to that.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Anyone have a question for the principal?
I really appreciate, Mike, you know, the information that you shared with us tonight. I know as a professional, you know, who works with children, and as a parent, it's really helpful to be reminded of those things, and then to have those strategies. Like Megan, I know the how really resonated with me, excuse me. I just need to write that all over, so when I get a little bit emotional, I remember to use the how and not the why, or
Yes.
what are you doing now?
Right.
Correct.
Yes.
Really write it down.
It's interesting how, you know, I can maintain my emotions when I'm working professionally with children, but when it's my own kids, I get that hook, and it's just like,
Yep. And that's a good, I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you, Stephen, because keep in mind, we as parents, we are all adjusting to the same confusion and stress that our kids are. And so we have to keep that perspective, or sometimes come back after the fact and try to do a little bit of that repair work. Of course, right? That comes with the territory. And there's kind of that pressure, because our kids are counting on us to do something, and whatever we do, they're going to imitate. That's the huge burden on parents, is they imitate us, and we're under stress as well. So I love opportunities like this, where parents get to talk with one another and share some of those ideas. And I hope that your group and the PTA group can continue this afterwards and share some ideas with each other and with other parents. You know, kids talk all the time with each other. And I think as parents, we sort of surrender that, or we give that up, or think that we're done. But actually, parents can support one another, even in a venue like this, a Zoom meeting. Who would have thought? But it can happen.
One of the things at school that I did, and when we go back, I hope we can do again because of the weather, but every day, and Stephen knows Rutherford very well, this is where I teach, we walked around our trail of learning, and that 10 minutes of walking, there was a lot of chit-chatting time, and there's just something about movement that releases some things. It, you know, it invigorates the brain. It was good for me as the teacher, who was under pretty big duress in August. I'm a lot better now that we've gone through some of this, but was really, you know, not really sure what was going on either. And it was just so good for our whole class community to go out. And I can only imagine for families, if you can just go on a walk, right?
Yes.
It needs to be a little warmer.
Well, I got in a 1.5-mile hike yesterday afternoon. My hands were cold, but it's so important to have that walking routine. And the reason I want to emphasize that, thank you, Melanie, is that research has shown the #1 best activity for reducing stress, reducing anxiety, and reducing depression is walking. It's statistically more effective than any other physical activity. Yes. Now, any physical activity is good and helpful, but walking seems to be the most effective, most helpful for the widest number of people. So I just want to celebrate that as a teacher. If you could get those kids out for a brief little walk, it's wonderful. Yep. And if nothing else, maybe kids can have a chance to walk a little bit in the hallways at school, even if they don't get to go outside. And at home, try to find some way to build in walking. Even in the cold weather, you can bundle up and get out for just a few minutes of that fresh air and that movement. And it helps all of us cope better with pressure and stress.
Mike, I want to thank you so much for being here. And Mary, thank you for helping us organize this as well. Mary is recording this right now, so we are very eager to share this with the rest of our families and staff in the Lake Elmo community and beyond. We'll share it with others on our Facebook page as well. But is there a way, if somebody's watching this later, if they have a question for you, Mike, is there a way we could contact you through the YSB?
Yeah, I can be reached. I work out of our Cottage Grove office. So the phone number in the Cottage Grove office where I have my voicemail is 651-458-5224. And they can ask for me and we can get in touch, and I'd love to answer questions or share some more ideas with you guys.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And if people didn't see it, Mary put in the chat his email address as well as the phone number that he just gave.
Yep, that works too. But sometimes people like to have kind of I know I sort of prefer an actual voice and talk to somebody rather than an email, which I don't know. Sometimes that can get kind of clunky. So I'd rather try and be more responsive by having an actual conversation if we can arrange that. Or comments, or let me throw out a little challenge. Will another parent, if you would please, can you share something that has worked well in your family that you'd like others to know about? Something about developing confidence or resilience in your kids, or even if it's a little thing, just share something that's worked well for your family.
I'll share something that I'm doing for February as kind of a confidence booster. For all three of my kids, every day in February, I cut out a paper heart and I put it on their door, and I put something about their personality or their person that I think is either unique to them or that I love. Like some of them are just as easy as you're a great reader, or I love your hugs. Some of them are more about like, I love how meticulous you are, or I love how creative you are, or different things like that. And if I miss a day, I just do two the next day.
Okay.
But they look for their heart most days. Or where's my new heart?
Nice. Good. Anybody else have something they could share that was kind of helpful and worked in your family? Okay, well, I can kind of wrap up my portion. Thank you all very much for participating. And if you're watching this later and you have some questions or comments, feel free to track me down, and I'll do my very best to respond and encourage you and give you some ideas on what might be helpful in your family.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.